Response to King Yaqub's video, Lunar Sabbath Nuked. Part 3, 3 classes of days. Hiram Yashra'al, servant of Yahuwah and of the Master Yahushua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes who are scattered abroad in the captivity, greetings. Brothers and sisters, we're going to be covering the 3 classes of days today, which are mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 46. And so I'm going to turn there. I'm going to read this passage to you concerning the 3 classes of days. Now, I mentioned in the intro how the first 3 of these videos, I mentioned it either in the intro or in the first of the videos, that the first 3 videos would be very foundational to your understanding of the Shabbat. And so it's very important that you grasp these concepts first before going into the rest of the videos, because the rest of them are primarily going to be examples, and they're going to be examples showing how the principles set forth in the first 3 of these videos applied throughout the times of the Scriptures. So in Ezekiel chapter 46, verse 1, the word reads, "Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, the gate of the inner court facing east is shut the 6 days of work, but on the Shabbat it is open, and on the day of the new moon it is open, and the prince shall enter by way of the porch of that gate from the outside, and he shall stand by the post, and the Kohanim shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall bow himself at the threshold of the gate, and shall go out, but the gate is not shut until evening, and the people of the land shall also bow themselves at the entrance to this gate before Yahuwah on the Shabbatot and on the new moons." So, brothers and sisters, we see 3 classes of days mentioned in this prophecy. I say prophecy because this has not happened yet. This is for the future. This is going to take place in the kingdom age. We see that the gate is going to be closed on the 6 working days. On the Shabbat, the gate will be open. On the new moon, the gate will be open for the purposes of the people of the land coming before Yahuwah to worship. Now, the 6 working days, I had already mentioned in the creation account video how that the emphasis throughout the Scriptures is not on the 7-day count toward the Shabbat, but on the 7-day pattern of the Shabbat. 6 working days, 7th day rest. 6 working days, 7th day rest. And we see that pattern emphasized here in the passage that I just read to you. It talks about the 6 working days where the gate of the inner courtyard was to be closed, but it was to be open on Shabbat and open on the new moon. So we see that in points 1 and point 2. Now, point 2 is really not a point that we need to discuss, because most of us agree that the Shabbat is a set-apart day of worship. It's set apart from the 6 working days, and because of the numerous Shabbat commands throughout the Torah, that is without dispute. But this 3rd class of days, which is the new moon, that's what I want to spend the lion's share of my time on in this particular video. Now, King Yaqub, in his video, he spent a great amount of time on this subject, seeking to prove that the new moon is not a Shabbat. And to that I say that I agree with him 100%. I agree the new moon is not a Shabbat, or it's not the Shabbat. And he used the passages of Scripture I have up here. Exodus 40 verses 16 and 17, Numbers chapter 1 verses 1 through 3, Ezra chapter 7 verses 6 through 10. These are the same passages he used to prove that the new moon is not a Shabbat. The Exodus passage shows where Mashah reared up the tabernacle on the first day of the month, on the new moon. That wouldn't have been done on the Shabbat. The Numbers account talks about the census and how the census was done, where the counting of the people, how that was a laborious task, and that took place on the first day of the month, on the new moon. That wouldn't have been done on the Shabbat. And so I want to actually read to you out of Ezra, because he gave this as well. Ezra chapter 7, verses 6 through 10. It says, "This Ezra came up from Babel, and he was a scribe, skilled in the Torah of Mashah, which Yahuwah Elohim of Yashra'al had given, and the sovereign gave him all he asked, according to the hand of Yahuwah his Elohim upon him. And some of the children of Yashra'al, and the Kohanim, and the Levites, and the singers, and the gatekeepers, and the Nethanim came up to Yerushalayim in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes, and he came to Yerushalayim in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the sovereign. For on the first of the first month he began to go up from Babel, and on the first day of the 5th month he came to Yerushalayim, according to the good hand of his Elohim upon him. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the Torah of Yahuwah, and to do it, and to teach laws and right rulings in yashra'al." So King Yaquab made the point, and I agree with him 100%, that Ezra, he was a scribe, and he had a heart for the Torah. He had prepared his heart to seek the Torah. So he would have definitely known if it was wrong for him to travel on the new moon. Apparently he did it, so apparently it wasn't wrong. And so we see there that the new moon is not Shabbat. We see from all three of these passages of scriptures that the new moon is not a Shabbat. But brothers and sisters, where I differ from King Yaquab is the point I want to make here in point 3. And that is that even though the new moon is not a Shabbat, and we see this even brought out in the passage I read to you in Ezekiel 46, nonetheless, the new moon is not just an ordinary day either. What we're going to see through the passages of Scripture that I'm going to give you here is that the new moon is a set-apart day of worship. It is a non-commercial day of worship. Now, how it differs from the Shabbat is that people can do ordinary chores on the new moon. They can do chores around the house, or they can travel. And so there's less restrictions than the Shabbat, but it is a non-commercial day of worship in that we're going to see throughout the scriptures that they didn't do commerce on that day. They didn't work their normal jobs on that day. They set that day apart for worship, even though it was not as restrictive as the 7th day Shabbat. And the reason why there's so much confusion about this is that the quote-unquote Jews in early centuries, that they fell out of the practice of setting apart the new moon. And so because of that, then in these more recent centuries, when people are rediscovering the Torah, most people look to the example of the so-called Jews in order to know how to worship. And so because they generally don't set apart the new moon, then most Roman Seventh-day Sabbath keepers that you see today do not set apart the new moon because they're following their example. But what we want to do is we want to restore the example of Scripture. And so that's what we're doing today. If we could go to 2 Kings chapter 4. This is the first example we go to. What's going on here is this: there's a woman who Elisha did a miracle for. She was barren, and she had asked that she have a child, and Elisha spoke forth the word, and this woman conceived, brought forth a child. We're going to pick it up in verse 17 of 2 Kings chapter 4. The word reads, "And the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had spoken to her. And the child grew, and it came to be on a day when he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said to his father, my head, my head. And he said to a servant, take him to his mother. And he took him and brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees till noon and died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of Elohim and shut him in and went out. And she called to her husband and said, Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, so that I hurry to the man of Elohim and return. And he said, Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Shabbat. And she said, It is well. Now, why did this woman's husband say that? Why are you going to the man of Elohim today? It is neither new moon nor the Shabbat. Because, just like we read in Ezekiel 46, 1 through 3, they understood that the new moon, like the Shabbat, is a non-commercial, set-apart day of worship. That's the day the man of Elohim would be available to minister to the people. So it was odd to this woman's husband that she would be trying to find him, and it wasn't new moon or Shabbat. It wasn't the regular time that the people had come before him, and he would be available to minister to them. So, second example is Isaiah chapter 66. Now, Isaiah chapter 66, many people already use this verse in order to prove the Shabbat, but not realizing that it proves the validity of the new moon just as much as the Shabbat. Isaiah 66 verse 23, it says, And it shall be that from new moon to new moon and from Shabbat to Shabbat shall all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. Now this is during the kingdom age. And when Yahuwah says all flesh shall come to worship before me, what that tells me is it's not going to be an option. This is going to be a command. Not just that all flesh come before him to worship on the Shabbat, but on the new moon as well. And then lastly, I want to look at Amos chapter 8. Now in Amos chapter 8, and we're going to start in verse 4. The word reads, Hear this, you who are swallowing up the needy, to do away with the poor of the land, saying, When does the new moon pass, so that we sell grain and the Shabbat, so that we trade our wheat to make the ephah small and the shekel large, and to falsify the scales by deceit, to buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, and to sell the chaff of the wheat. Now, the argument that people make, and King Yaquab included, is that this isn't talking about the new moon in general, but it's only talking about the new moon of the 7th month, which would be Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, because that's the only place in the Torah where we see we're commanded to set apart and rest on the first day of the month. But brothers and sisters, we already saw passages of Scripture that showed the new moon to be a non-commercial, set-apart day of worship. Here, if they meant to say Yom Teruah, why doesn't it just say Yom Teruah? Why does it say the new moon? Now, in order to prove his point, King Yaquab mentioned in verse 1 of chapter 8 here that Amos was showing a basket of summer fruit. And so that must mean that this new moon was during that time period. But if you read it carefully, this was a vision. And he was trying to make a point in this vision that was not connected to what was going on the new moon when these greedy merchants were waiting for it to be over with, and the Shabbat as well, so that they could rip people off, because nobody would be buying and selling on that day. It was a non-commercial day of worship. So the point I'm making with the new moon being a non-commercial day of worship like the Shabbat is that it is set apart from the 6 working days. The gate is open, Ezekiel 46, on the new moon, on the Shabbat, closed the 6 working days. These are 3 classes of days that do not coincide with one another. The new moon does not count as a working day. The new moon is set apart from the working days. It's important that you remember that, because that is foundational to understanding these examples that we're going to go through in these later videos. Remember, the new moon is set apart from the 6 working days. It is not one of the 6 working days. Praise Yahuwah. So I'm going to shut that down. If you want me to go into more depth, then message me on this. But we'll shut it down for now. And with that, I will say shalom.